Hello, friends. Welcome to the Ancient Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Motley. And today, I am really excited. I'm very honored to have Dr. Bradley Nelson with me. He wrote the Emotion Code. He wrote the Body Code, the Belief Code. He is the CEO of Discover Healing, and his book has been one of the books that I recommended to my patients when they wanted to understand things about emotions and how it connects to physical healing and health. Doc, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you.
Well, you are so welcome. It's great to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation.
Well, I truly am grateful, and I want everybody out there to know that when you talk to somebody that you admire much and you're very thankful for, and you guys out there listening know that you can at times wonder what you would talk to a person who you admire so much and what will you say. So I have to make sure that I don't get too nervous or anything, Doc, when I talk to you. But I really am thankful because for everybody out there, when we talk about how emotions and physicality interlay, you brought a book into publication that really explains how physical traumas can come from emotional traumas. And I just want us to have a really good conversation because many people out there listening are like, yes, I know my emotions created some physical problems and vice versa. So first of all, before I start babbling, Doc, I want everybody to hear your story or give us a synopsis, why you're so passionate, what brought about you writing such good books.
Well, I'll tell you really honestly, I think it was foreordained. I think it was my mission that I was supposed to do in this world. Because when I look at my life, it's like all of these things that have happened to me that have enabled me to do this work. It's not me. It's the higher power that's been working through me. And how I got chosen, I have no idea. It was probably a mistake, but anyway. Well, the first thing that happened to me, my first experience really with healing, that was really kind of the pivotal thing that really was the beginning that launched me into this whole career was I was really sick with the measles. I was 7 years old, and my parents came into the room. I'm lying on the couch in the living room where they'd made a bed for me temporarily. And I'm lying there just feeling really sick and nauseated and feverish. And my parents walked into the room. It was at night. Everybody else had gone to bed. And my mother said to my father, she said, honey, will you kneel down with me and will you say a prayer for our boy so he'll be able to get well? Now, my dad wasn't a preacher or pastor or anything like that. He was in real estate and construction and so on. But they knelt down by the side of the couch. My dad starts praying. And in the middle of this short, heartfelt prayer, a change began at the top of my head, and it went whoosh through my body to the soles of my feet, and I was instantaneously made completely well. Now, to go from being really sick one moment to being completely healed in the next instant is so bizarre and so unusual that the memory of that is burned into every particle of my being. I mean, it's like it happened yesterday. And anyway, I held my tongue till my dad was done speaking because I was just bursting with excitement. And when he was done, I said, I'm better. And they said, well, all right, that's fine. Go back to sleep. I knew that the plan was the next day I was going into the hospital into something called an oxygen tent. I'd heard my parents talking. I didn't know what an oxygen tent was, but it sounded interesting, except I was too sick to camp. So anyway, about 7 or so years later, I was 13 years old. And I started having these terrific pains in my back that I was able to ignore for a little while, but they pretty quickly got worse and worse and worse until they reached this unbelievable point where I would, and it wasn't constant. It was kind of out of the blue. These pains would just they'd sometimes put me on the ground or take my breath away. It's terrifying. And my folks were really worried. They took me to the hospital and they ran these tests. And I found out later, number of years later, that my parents were told that I had kidney disease. There was really no treatment available for me. And that it was kind of a 50-50 thing. My body, they didn't have any treatment for it. They didn't do kidney transplants back then. And so if my kidneys died, that was the end of
Mm.
me. And so because there was no treatment available in Western medicine, they had nothing to offer. My mother back in those days was really a health nut. Back in the days when people thought if you actually took supplements, you were kind of out of your mind, right? It wasn't that long ago. I remember those days. And so my parents decided they would take me to see some other doctors. Now, these doctors operated in a clinic that was actually just a trailer house. It was out on the edge of town and in a wheat field in Great Falls, Montana, where I was growing up. And they took me to see these people. And these were a couple of old-time osteopathic doctors that when the osteopathic profession became kind of engulfed by the Western medical establishment and they began prescribing drugs and everything else, and that whole story, these two decided they didn't want to have anything to do with that. So they stayed out of the profession essentially and just had a cash practice and did their own thing, and they would travel around. And it was certainly a different kind of clinic. I mean, I can remember scraping the mud off my shoes trying to get into their place because it was in the middle of a wheat field. But sometimes we'd pull up and there would be a huge busload of people driving away that had driven there from the Dakotas or somewhere else. I mean, these people were really interesting and really amazing. And I started working, they started working with me, and right away, my pain started to be less and less frequent and less severe. And within about 3 weeks, I didn't have any more pain at all. And in my heart, I knew that what these people had been doing was exactly what I needed. And they were basically adjusting, just realigning my spine. And so I decided that's what I wanted to do with my life at 13. And my parents took me back to the hospital and they ran all the tests, and all the tests were negative. But I can remember lying on my back on their treatment table, looking up at them saying, when I grew up, I want to do what you're doing. And they were very discouraging. They would say, no, you don't. They'd say, if you go to chiropractic school or naturopathic school or something, they said, when you get out, you'll be like a zombie. They said, they'll fill your head full of so many fixed ideas about healing, you won't even be able to think for yourself. And, I really believe these people. I felt they'd save my life, and so that really sunk in. Well, let's see, fast forward a little longer, and I had probably about another 7 years, things running those 7-year cycles. I ended up going to school at BYU, Hawaii, in Laie, on the island of Oahu. I was going to college there for a while, and I needed one more class to round out my schedule. And the class that fit was a class on computer programming. And so I thought, well, I don't know anything about computer programming, but this class fits the schedule. Maybe it'll be interesting. I don't know. It was like a half a credit or something. So I went ahead and took it. And wow, it introduced me to a whole new world, the world of computers. And I mean, I fell hook, line, and sinker into that world. And that was the only class I ever took, taught myself everything else. And within a year, had a business called the Computer Tutor, where I would go into people's businesses and they'd have a new IBM PC or something. And actually, I guess it was another year or two after that because the PC came out in 83. But anyway, I started doing programming for people, and I loved it. I thought it was great. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. This is awesome. And then I was going to college in Provo, Utah, at Brigham Young University, and I was about 6 months away from going into the MBA program. And I was studying information systems, and political science. And I went home to Montana with my wife, and we were sitting around Christmas time, sitting around with my parents. And my father asked me this question. He said, "Are you sure that you don't want to go to chiropractic school? Because it seems like a great career, and you've always wanted to do that." And I said, "No, I'm going this other direction. I'm going to get my MBA and go to work for some big company, and work on computers." And he said, "Well, why don't you think about it one more time?" And I thought, well, all right. So my wife and I made up a pro and con list, of these two possible futures, right? And it was a long list on both sides, and I was not really convinced. But having learned that there's a higher power you can draw upon and get help, that night we got on our knees and prayed and asked for some guidance. And that night I was awakened 3 different times. And each time that I was awakened, my mind would be full of all these thoughts about how great it is to heal people naturally, and serve people and help people and so on. And I would counter with something like, well, yeah, but the new IBM PC is so awesome, whatever. So the next morning I get up and this happened 3 times, right? So the next day I still don't know what to do. So that next night I'm on my knees again with my wife. And that night, something totally different happened. That night I was awakened 3 more times. And each time that I was awakened, the thoughts and feelings were exponentially more powerful than the time before. So that the 3rd time that I was awakened on that second night, it was the thoughts of service to mankind and humanity and the whole world. It was absolutely overwhelming. And right then I heard a voice that spoke to me as clearly as I've ever heard anything in my life. And it said, "This is a sacred calling." And I thought, okay, I accept, basically. I didn't really know what that meant, but I knew that, okay, this was the answer. I needed to go to chiropractic school. So I did. And it was a very interesting, very fun experience. I loved it. You've been through it. Yeah. You know what it's like. It's really cool, huh? And highly recommend it. Well, one of the things that happened to me was I was doing computer programming for the school, working in the admissions office, just part-time periodically to kind of defray expenses. And so I'm still really into computers. And then one day my neurology instructor is up at the board and he's just riffing on how the brain is a computer. And I was listening to him and thinking about how, that makes sense. The brain is kind of a computer. And I remember thinking, gee, I wonder if we'll ever have the technology to be able to access what's going on in that computer, because as a doctor, which I was a doctor in training, that would be the ultimate way to be able to help patients, because that brain computer must know what's really wrong with people and why they're having problems. And what if we could hack into that somehow? And I remember clearly thinking, well, it'll probably be 200 or 300 years before we can have that technology. And I just put it out of my mind. Little did I know that that's what I was going to spend my career working on, right? And so I had some really interesting experiences. One of the first things that happened to me, the very first patient that I saw was this guy that was about 300 pounds. And he was about, in my mind, he was like 6'8". He was probably about 6'5" or something. But he was actually crying because he was in so much pain with his low back. And it was like the very first patient I saw when I got into my own practice. And I remember thinking, wow, I remember feeling a sense of panic and thinking, how can I help this guy? And it wasn't that I hadn't been trained or that I didn't know any methodologies, but I remember thinking, how can I know what he really truly needs so that I can really help him, Because there is a truth there. There's a truth in his body about what it is that he really truly needs. And that was kind of an ongoing thought that I had for, even still to this day. It's like, what's the truth about this person? Whatever. So I said a silent prayer for help because I thought, I need help. I don't know how to do this. And I was able to help that guy. And so that became a habit. This habit of silently asking for help, asking God, and as a Christian, I pray in the name of Jesus Christ, just silently asking for help. Now, this was a totally private, totally personal habit. It was just a momentary pause that I would take before I'd work on a patient. But I'll tell you something. There were times when I would ask for that help silently and information would just flood in. And that didn't happen very often. And sometimes that was a whole new way to look at things, a whole new kind of imbalance that I had never heard of and that nobody else had ever heard of either, as far as I knew. And so because I was basically a nerd, I've got this computer there in my office and I'm recording things diligently. When I would find something new, I would record it. And gradually what happened was it turned out that there were 6 categories of imbalances that my patients were suffering from. And those were things like energies and pathogens and misalignments and nutrition and lifestyle things and, toxicity and imbalances of the circuitry of the body. And anyway, so I found that this worked really, really well. And I had some really wild experiences. In fact, let me tell you kind of how this came about. I used activator methods, for a long time.
Love it.
Right? Yeah. And, and basically for people that are listening, when you use an activator, it's like looks like a little metal kind of a syringe with a rubber tip. And when you have a misaligned bone, people like it because instead of cracking your neck, you can actually use this little gun, right? And you can find bones out of alignment and just click. Yeah, you've got one. There you go. Yeah. That's it, right? And so in this method, we had a table that would stand up vertically, and the patient would stand. They'd put their nose in the slot on the table and stand on the foot plate and put their hands on the grips on the side. And then I would press a button and the table would lay down horizontal and the foot plate would drop away so I could get a clear picture of their leg length. And in this method, you have the patient do certain things, or you can push on certain things and you'll get reactions from the body. In other words, if a bone is out of alignment, say, and it's misaligned in that direction, if I push it further into that direction temporarily, right, what'll happen is the leg length will change because that's an irritation to the body. On the other hand, if I come and I push it the other direction temporarily, the body will relax. And so I learned this whole methodology of working on the body and realigning things. And so what I would do with the patient is I would work on them and try to realign everything and get everything lined up so that at the end of their session, their legs are perfectly balanced, right? And that's how you're done. There's nothing else to do. That's how I did it for quite a number of years. So one day what happens is this patient comes in, routine patient, do his session. I get him all done. It's the very end of his session. His legs totally balanced. And for some reason, I start thinking about his left kidney. And I come back and check his legs, expecting them to be balanced, just one last check. And boom, his legs were way off. Like 3/4 of an inch off. And I thought, wait, I just got this guy balanced. What? And I thought about his right kidney and came back and his legs were balanced. And I thought, no way. And I thought about his left kidney and boom. And I did this for, probably a minute or so, just checking. And sure enough, it was, so what I learned from that is that somehow what I was thinking was having an effect on his body. His subconscious mind apparently was able to understand what I was thinking. It was the most amazing thing. So at that point, then what I started doing, right?
I love this, Doc.
What I started doing, at that point, I started, when people would come in, I would just silently ask for a yes and a no, and I would get a change in the leg length. So I started communicating with the subconscious minds of my patients. And it was so cool, and it was a lot faster. I could just simply ask, okay, is C1 aligned? Is C2 aligned? Pretty soon I started just asking if things were happy or unhappy because, just like in Chinese medicine, right? You've got all the organs and the glands, and there are all these relationships, which of course, way better than I do. And so you can look at all those organs and glands and really all the components that make up the body as being intelligent. And so with the body code, what we do is we speak to those. We just talk to the body. And if there's a bone that's out of alignment or an organ that's imbalanced or whatever, it'll tell you. You just ask, all right, is this bone happy? If it's not, it might be out of alignment. There might be something else going on, various different things. So that was really, really fun. And as time went on, there were more and more interesting things that happened. It was a whole like 18 years or so of just working with people day in and day out, and then having those little breakthroughs periodically that, I know that you're fully aware of and intimate with, because it's a process that we all go through, right? As doctors, we're trying everything we know to fix our patients, and then, wow, that happened. Cool.
We do, Doc. Right? I'm sorry. This is great. Keep going. This is great, Doc.
Well, anyway, so let's see. Where was I going to go? Let's see. Well, for example, one day I get a new patient that comes in. She's been in a car accident about 4 days before, and she's got this pain that's about a 9 to 10 on the 0 to 10 scale. So it was really hurting from base of her skull right here and the left shoulder all the way down to here. And I thought, okay, you know, her neck's out of alignment. I started working with her, getting everything lined up all the bones, lined up the ribs. Everything was lined up. And she was still in the same pain. And I thought, okay, this is weird. What's going on? I sent her next door at my office, right next door. I was in a medical center, and right next door there was an MRI machine. So she gets an MRI, a magnetic resonance scan of her neck, and it comes back and it looks absolutely textbook perfect. I mean, perfect curve. Everything looks perfect. And so that didn't really help me. And so then I thought, okay, well, maybe I can ask some questions about this. And so I started asking some questions. And what I found was, and what I'm doing, again, I'm just kind of thinking the questions and then getting changes on her leg length, you know, balanced for yes, imbalanced for no, right? And what I find is that her heart is actually out of alignment. And so I did some more testing and figured out that it was misaligned a little bit forward and a little bit, you know, to one side. And I guess in the accident, that's what happened. And I mean, you wouldn't be able to see that on an x-ray. We're talking about a very, very slight kind of misalignment. But I'll tell you something. When I made that correction, and basically what I did, and the chiropractors that are listening to this will understand, I basically just put the palm of my hand, the heel of my hand right on her sternum and figured out what direction I needed to go. And then just gave her a little impulse with an intent to realign her heart. Instantly, the pain was gone, right? Instantly. She became my office manager, actually. It was kind of fun. So anyway, yeah, I had lots and lots of interesting experiences. And so one of the things that I learned was about emotional baggage, because when I began to really communicate with the subconscious minds of these patients, that was what showed up the most. That was the single biggest common denominator for all of my patients, no matter how young they were or how old they were, no matter what they were suffering from. It was emotional baggage. And to understand what emotional baggage is, you have to realize that these bodies that we inhabit, even though they seem so solid, right, they're actually just pure energy. If you talk to a quantum physicist, that's what they'll tell you. In fact, our bodies are more of a force field than anything else. I mean, in a way, our bodies are almost an illusion because they are, they're just a force field. It's really weird. But if you talk to a quantum physicist, they'll tell you that that's absolutely true. I mean, if you zoom in on your hand with a big microscope, you know, if you keep zooming in, pretty soon you're at the level of the cells, and keep zooming in, you're at the level of organelles that make up the cells, and keep zooming in, and maybe you're looking at a mitochondria, and keep zooming in, maybe you're at a strand of DNA, and keep zooming in, and you're looking at a single individual atom, and you zoom in on the atom and you look inside of there and you see, oh, there's nothing in there at all. And the next atom's a long distance away, right? And so, in fact, I heard a few years ago, quantum physicists say that if you could remove all the empty space from every single person on Earth, in other words, if you could remove all the space between all the atoms in everybody's body on Earth, you could fit all 7.8 billion people in the world into a box the size of a sugar cube, you know, which is totally mind-blowing. We can't even wrap our minds around this at all, right?
Yes.
No, it's impossible. But that's what they say. And so there's another side of our reality that we have a hard time wrapping our heads around. But people like Einstein understood it. He said, you know, probably 100 years ago, the medicine of the future will be the medicine of frequencies, right? And probably when he said that, nobody had any idea what he was talking about, except his, you know, his best friends. And Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, because that's what everything is, ultimately. Everything is energy, frequency, and vibration. But when you're feeling a certain emotion, maybe that emotion is overwhelming. Or maybe an emotion comes up for you and you make it overwhelming because you decide to get really upset Or maybe an emotion is coming up for you and you decide you don't want to go there. And so you stop that process and you stuff that emotion, swallow it. The problem is any of those three circumstances will result in what we call a trapped emotion. And a trapped emotion it's the energy of that emotional experience that was coming up that now didn't get processed correctly. And it's stuck in the body, trapped. We call them trapped emotions. And the problem is these trapped emotions cause all kinds of symptoms, even physical symptoms. In fact, really the very first case that I saw with physical symptoms was a woman that I'd seen her before, but it had been a couple of months. She comes in one day and all of a sudden she tells us she feels like she's having a heart attack. She's got crushing chest pain, difficulty breathing. The left side of her face is completely numb. Her left arm is totally numb. Looks like a heart attack, right? And so I told my staff, look, let me have 1 minute with her and stand by because we might need an ambulance, right? And we were right next to a medical center, so getting an ambulance would have been really quick. But anyway, I did some testing on her and found that she had a trapped emotion that was a cause of her symptoms. Mm-hmm. And the emotion was grief. And it had occurred 3 years earlier. And when I arrived at that, she burst into tears and she says, I can't believe that's affecting me. I thought I dealt with all that. And I said, well, what in the world happened? And she said 3 years before, she was married to a different guy. She was really in love with him, thought she was going to be with him forever, but found out he'd been having an affair. So she confronted him with the evidence and the marriage blew up and the whole thing was over. And she just, it was an awful thing for her to have to go through. Well, subsequently, she went to therapy for about a year, dealt with it, mentally and moved on and had even gotten remarried. And so as far as she was concerned, that guy was just the guy that, betrayed her and he was her ex. As far as her body was concerned, that emotion that was so powerful was still there. In fact, when I released that, and the whole process took about a minute. But when I released that by just swiping a few times down the governing meridian, right down the middle of the back, the feeling came back into her arm and into her face within about 3 seconds. And the chest pain, the difficulty breathing, all gone. And she left the office about 10 minutes later after hanging out and joking around with me and my staff and feeling, just so relieved and so grateful and kind of miraculous. And after she left, I remember sitting down at my desk and my head was kind of spinning, thinking, what did I just witness? I mean, what just happened there? Well, what we know now is that the number one way that emotional baggage like this will manifest in the body is through physical pain. Now, it won't always manifest physical pain, but physical pain is a really big one. It's what we find is that about 90% of all the physical pain that people have is actually due to some kind of emotional energy that is stuck in your body. It could be from the womb when your parents were arguing. It could be from something that you inherited at conception. An energy that might go back for generations. It might be something that happened when you were bullied in childhood. It might be something you don't even remember, right? In fact, I can tell you one more story along those lines. Well, this is fun for me to tell these stories and share all this because that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And luckily it's fun for me. So one day I did an event. It was in Las Vegas and it was just like a 2-hour workshop that I did. And at the very beginning of this workshop, I'm meeting everybody as they're coming in. And I don't know, we probably had a couple hundred people there. Well, I happened to meet this young woman and her mother. And so later on, I asked if I could get a volunteer out of the audience. And so this young woman who happens to be sitting right in the front row comes up and I have her hold her arm out and I'm asking questions. Do you have a trapped emotion we can release? The answer was yes. The emotion turned out to be forlorn, which is kind of feeling all alone and hopeless and desolate and lonely and kind of an intense emotion. And so, I thought, all right, do we need to know any more about this? Sometimes we need to dig a little deeper with these trapped emotions, to figure out what's going on. And you just ask the subconscious mind. It's the computer inside that understands all this. So I said, do we need to know more about this? The answer was yes. Her arm was strong. I'm muscle testing her, pressing down on her arm. And so I asked, when did this occur? She was about 21, I think. And it actually turned out that it had happened around the first year of her life. And I thought, okay, well, she's not going to remember. And I asked her, I said, do you remember anything about what this might be? She said, no idea. And at that moment, I happened to look out at the audience, right? There's her mother on the front row. And I mean, she's white as a ghost. And she's got her hands up, kind of covering her mouth and nose, right? And I said, hey, do you have any idea what this might be about? And she was really embarrassed, but she said that back during those years when she was raising her daughter, she used to use cloth diapers. And one day she accidentally pinned her daughter to her diaper. So the safety pin went through her daughter's flesh, right? And she did not even know about it until she changed her the next time, which was probably, at least a couple of hours. And so here's this poor baby that's got this pin through her flesh. And I'm sure she was crying. I mean, her mom must have been so overwhelmed, otherwise she probably would have noticed, but she was really embarrassed about it. So what I did is I asked the subconscious mind of this girl, is that what created this? And the answer was absolutely yes, right? So then I just swiped down the back a few times to release it. And the whole process might have taken, I don't know, maybe a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes at the most. So she goes back and sits down. And I forgot all about it. But 10 days later, I get an email from this girl's mother. And she said, you worked on my daughter. She said, my daughter didn't tell you this, but she's had a problem with her hip and her knee. She's had pain in her hip and pain in her knee for, I don't know, since I think she was maybe 8 or 10. And she said, or maybe it was 8 years, can't remember now, but it was quite a while. She said it's been gradually, slowly getting worse over time. And it's slowly beginning to affect the way that she walks. And we've taken her to different people to try to fix this. And nothing's ever worked. But she said from the moment you release that trapped emotion of forlorn from her being pinned to her diaper, she said she's had absolutely no pain whatsoever. And not only that, she feels this new lightness of being that she hasn't felt before. And she's walking, totally normally now. That slight imbalance is gone. And she said, I waited 10 days because I just wanted to make sure that this was actually, real. And she said, yeah, it's real. Whatever you did, fixed it. So think about that. That's a beautiful aspect, see, of the emotion code is that, and the body code and belief code as well. You can find things that are known to the subconscious mind that are completely unknown to the conscious mind. I mean, the way I look at it, the conscious mind is kind of like a peanut brain that's along for the ride, basically. It's a peanut brain, and it's smaller than that. It's like a lentil brain. And the subconscious mind is really the smart part of us. The subconscious mind is the part of us that's creating millions of new cells every minute. It's, trillions of chemical reactions, I'm sure, every minute. It's keeping air moving in and out of our lungs. It's doing all of these things to keep us alive from one moment to the next. And this ongoing miracle from one moment to another that we call life, right? So the subconscious mind is the source. But, as a computer programmer, when I became a doctor and I started trying to figure things out with the body, the training that I had really helped me. Because as I began to realize that the subconscious mind is a computer, I began to realize that it's a computer unlike any computer we are used to. So, for example, if I hold up my phone, right? My phone is a computer, right? It's a computer. And it's got a screen and we can touch it. So it's a touch screen. We can interface with it and interact with it. We can see things and messages and so on appear on the screen. Now I'm sitting at my laptop. I've got a screen. I've got a keyboard. So it would be a screen/keyboard interface. It's a computer. That's how we interact with the keyboard. But the human body has no screen. Communicate its messages to us. It is a computer. But how does it communicate? Well, it communicates through the symptoms that we experience. So it's not only physical pain, but it's depression and anxiety and phobias and panic attacks and PTSD and eating disorders and self-sabotage of all kinds. It communicates to us through symptoms. And if those symptoms are bad enough, and if they are arranged in a certain sequence, we'll be diagnosed with some kind of a disease, right? And, it's what we have found is that every disease process that we have seen, including all of our practitioners all over the world, over the last 35, 36 years, every disease process has an emotional component, right? Now, you're an acupuncturist, okay? And that's fantastic. One of the things that I think is so interesting that you'll have to explore is that we find that emotional energies can block meridians, and they can stop the flow of energy in a meridian. And of course, there are other things that can do that too. And so I'm sure that you probably have had situations where maybe, you put some acupuncture meridian, some needles into a meridian, and maybe a person has an emotional event that they all of a sudden start reliving. And
yes,
right?
Yes, Doc. Totally.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So what I think is that sometimes the emotional energy gets stored in the meridian itself for whatever reason. And so, there's different ways to come at this, right? But that's one of the things that we have found that's super interesting. So anyway, as time went on, I realized, okay, this information has to go to the whole world. This isn't just for me. I need to quit my practice. I got to write a book, and people all over need to know about this, because I was really driven by two very powerful urges. One was to empower people, to teach people that they can heal themselves and their loved ones and family members in most cases.
Wow.
I mean, Western medicine's probably always going to be needed, right? I mean, people are always going to break their legs and get run over by trains and crazy things, right? So Western medicine is great at things like that. Yeah, sorry.
I love it. Yeah, it's got great, Doc. Keep going. This is great.
But so Western medicine is always going to be there. And if you think about it, Western medicine, the medical profession, is amazingly good at acute problems, right? I remember when my dad had an aneurysm about 18 years ago, I guess now. And they were able to put a titanium thread into his groin, up through the heart, up into this tiny vessel at the very front of his brain, and then release this little teeny titanium thread that remembered that it actually was supposed to be in the shape of a ball. It reforms into a ball and plugs the leak. I mean, it's mind-blowing technology, right, that they have. The problem is that most people are conditioned to think that if they have some kind of a problem, some kind of pain or some kind of other ailment, that Western medicine has the answer. And Western medicine's answer usually is to suppress the symptoms, right, with medication, as you know. And so anyway, I'll tell you, I believe that every single person that is in this world, or that will come into this world, or that has ever been born into this world, has a birthright. And that birthright is to be a healer, to heal themselves, heal their loved ones. And what this work that we're doing, the emotion code, the body code, belief code, what it is it's really just a way for people to recapture that ability, to regain that ability, to take on that birthright again that somewhere along the line, we lost. And we're at a point where, the average person, if you tell them that they have those abilities latent within them, they would probably just look at you glassy-eyed. It's absolutely the reality, Well, don't I need Doan's pills, or I need to go to my doctor? That's how it is for most people. That's how we're conditioned.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So, and, conventional wisdom, remember, is almost always bought and paid for by somebody.
That's right.
So
That's right. And Doc, when you've had the success, when you were talking about going down the governing vessel, the governing meridian that goes down, and swiping it. When you created and found out with the young lady, when you found out, she had that event, with her ex, when you started to create the
Yeah.
emotion code, did you feel like it was a download that you knew, like, particular patterns, like you swipe down the governing vessel? How did you know, like, that was going to, can you describe the emotion code, like an example, like this is how you find it, and this is
Yeah.
what I do, and this is like, clear, because I know people out there, like, I want to know what goes on with it.
Yeah. Well, we have a chart of emotions that looks like this. It's got 60 emotions on it.
Oh man.
And it's divided up into
Doc,
six
yeah, I got to get, that's great.
rows.
Yep.
2 columns, 6 rows. And so, yeah, and you can, these are available. You can go to Google, you can go to discoverhealing.com, and, you can get one of these. Anyway, also emotioncodegift.com. I think you can pick one of these up. Anyway, so let's say I'm there working on you, and we're live together, live and in person, right? Maybe you have some kind of symptom, physical, mental, emotional. Maybe you don't. Either way, what we would do is, if I were there with you, and if I were going to muscle test you, I'd have you hold your arm out, one arm parallel to the floor, and your listeners and viewers, they can try this too. You can try this on somebody. I would press down on your arm, okay, and I would have you make a statement that's a true statement, okay? Like, my name is Christopher. If you were to make that statement, and then if I were to press down on your outstretched arm, you would be strong, okay? You'd be able to resist me, because that's a true statement. And your internal computer reads that as being congruent. Now, if you were to make a false statement, like if you were to say, my name is Bob, if I were to press down on your outstretched arm at that point, you'd weaken. Now, those of you that are watching or listening, if you've never tried this before, you actually have to try this. Try this later, try it tonight, try it right now, whatever. Grab somebody and have them say their name is their name, or their name is somebody else's name, and watch what happens, okay, with the strength of their body. Now, this was something that was really developed by Dr. George Goodhart, right? Muscle testing, getting answers, testing the strength of the various muscles in the body, and so on. And that was back in the 1960s. But basically what we would do at that point is we would ask, okay, if you're testable, if your body is strong on your name, and when you say your name is your name, and if it's weak on you saying your name is somebody else's name, then what we would do at that point is we would ask, okay, do you have a trapped emotion that we can release that's contributing to maybe whatever issue you're having? Maybe you've got a headache, okay? We would ask, do you have a trapped emotion we can release that's contributing to your headache? And you're going to get either a yes or a no out of the subconscious mind. It's a binary computer. Binary just means yes or no, 1 or 0, right? And so the answer is going to show up either a yes or a no. If it shows up as a yes, and it probably will, then we would go to the chart and we would ask, okay, is this emotion in column A? And if the answer is no, that means it's in column B, okay? Because there are 60 emotions, and these 60 emotions cover the breadth of emotions that we experience as human beings.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
They're all on here, but it's pretty quick. So let's say, for example, we're testing you, and your subconscious mind goes strong on, is it in column B? Well, now we know we've eliminated half the list, right? We know it's not in column A. It has to be in column B. So now what we do is we cut that list in half and ask, okay, well, is it in one of the odd rows? Row 1, 3, or 5. And if the answer is yes to that, we've eliminated all the even rows, and we now have 15 left out of 60. If that's weak, we know it's in an even row, right? And so it's a process of elimination. You see, the way that this works is, you see, when we ask, do you have a trapped emotion we can release that's contributing to your headache or whatever? If the subconscious mind says yes, it knows exactly what the emotion is. And what we have to do is play charades essentially with the subconscious so that we can ascertain what the subconscious mind knows. Does that make sense?
Yes. No.
That's how we do it, see? All right, so let's say that it's in an odd row. Well, is it in row 1? Maybe that's weak. Is it in row 3? Maybe that's strong. Okay, so then we have 5 emotions left out of 60. So now we ask, all right, well, Is it confusion? Maybe that's weak. Is it defensiveness? That's weak. Maybe grief? Maybe that's strong, right? At that point, now we've identified the emotion. And at that point, what we do is we ask, okay, do we need to know more about this? Because see, here's the thing. The subconscious, when you feel an emotion, when you have an emotional experience, most of the time what happens is that emotion rises and we start to feel it, and we might think the thoughts that go along with that emotion, or even feel some kind of physical sensations that go along with that emotion. But then most of the time what we do is we acknowledge the emotion and we allow it to just dissipate its energy and go away. And that closes the loop on that emotional experience, you see. And so now we're ready for the next emotional experience. But if you bury the emotion as it's coming up because you don't want to go there, or if you artificially enhance the emotion and you get really upset and fly off the handle maybe, or if the emotion is just really overwhelming because something really bad or really intense is happening, any of those three circumstances will result in that energy being left kind of suspended in the body. In other words, the emotional loop is beginning, the energy is trying to be expressed, but for some reason it gets blocked. And now we have trapped energy, blocked energy. That's what we call it, a trapped emotion. And so the reason why we ask at this point in the little process, the reason why we ask, do we need to know more about this, is because sometimes the subconscious mind, in order to really process this energy that's trapped and release it, sometimes it wants you to know a little more about this loop that got stuck open. In other words, let's say that the emotion is grief. And let's say we ask, do we need to know more about this? And let's say that your subconscious mind says, yes, we need to know more. Well, the first thing we would do is figure out when it happened. Okay. So let's say that you're 40 years old. We would ask, all right, well, did this occur, dividing your life in half, which makes it easier? Did this happen earlier than age 20? Maybe that's a yes. Did it happen earlier than 10? Maybe that's a no. Okay. Did it happen between 10 to 15? Maybe that's a no. 16? Maybe that's a yes. And then suddenly a memory might come back to you, or it might not. But maybe, maybe it was your first love and it broke up. A lot of the time, those first loves don't work, But remember how intense the emotions are when you're young, when you're those ages. We see that kind of thing, but trapped emotions can happen at any time in your life. So then let's say that you come up with something and you say, well, maybe it was the breakup I had, or maybe my dad, lost his job or whatever. We can ask, is that what created this? Was it about when your girlfriend told you to drop dead? Oh yeah, that's what it was, right? Then we could ask again, do we need to know more about this? And if the answer is no, then we just swipe, and you can use a magnet, okay, any kind of a magnet, or you can use your hand. Your hand's also biomagnetic. And you just start at the forehead, and you just go over the top of the head and the back of the neck once, twice, 3 times to release that energy. Kind of like taking a magnet and rubbing, I'll take a credit card. Okay, here's my American Express card, right? Gets a lot of work out, this card. Imagine if I take a magnet and I rub that magnetic strip. What happens? Well, the data on the card is gone.
Scrap it, yeah.
Yeah, if I try to swipe it, it's history. That won't affect the chip, but it will definitely affect that magnetic strip. And that's essentially the same thing. When we swipe a few times, what we're doing is we're putting intention into that governing meridian, and that energy goes into the rest of the body, and it just has the effect of deleting or transforming that energy, that emotional energy. So now it's gone and not affecting you anymore. And we've never seen one of these come back ever. They don't come back. When we clear these in this way that I'm showing you or sharing with you, they don't ever come back. They're gone permanently. And that's one of the really nice things about this, because if they would, if they came back, it would just be kind of an exercise in frustration, but they don't. When you work on an emotion like this and you release it, it's gone forever. Now, the average person probably has about 300 of these.
Wow. 300.
Yeah.
So Doc, if somebody came to you and they know that they have it and they have 300 of these, you run through, and I don't know if that terminology, like go through this list. when a person comes to you and you find 300, do you find a priority one, or is it like because you can clear one, or do you have to go step by step through each one?
Yeah. Well, the subconscious mind is basically like the original Chat GPT. Okay, it's like this intelligence that you can talk to, and you can ask, "Hey, prioritize this for me. We want the biggest bang for the buck here. What's the most damaging emotion you have?" And the subconscious will typically give that to you, so you can totally prioritize. And yeah, and it'll absolutely do it. So so yeah, one of the nice things about this work is that, and what happens to a lot of people is that they'll start with a practitioner, but then they start to realize, this isn't that hard. I think I really like this. This is really helping me. And they're often, our practitioners encourage their clients, get the book, learn how to do this. See, and then so it's kind of a grassroots thing that's going on where practitioners will work with clients and clients become practitioners, and then they work with other people and they help other people, and it's just spreading. And it has to go that way, see, because the world is in this transformational process. I believe the earth is in labor trying to give birth to this whole new world, unlike any world that any of us have ever known, a world that's dominated by unconditional love, where God's presence is going to be here, and it's going to be an amazing world. And we're going to get there eventually. It's going to be a little bumpy, I think, but we're going to get there. But that's what this work is also about. On a personal level, yes, it's about people getting out of pain and feeling better and functioning better and getting married who couldn't get married and all kinds of these things. But on a macro level, it's about healing, the earth, and it's about healing the animals. See, a dear friend of mine, Marie Holiday from Spain, teaches these events in the UK that we've been to and spoken at a number of times. She does the World Animal Energy Healing Conference, and she does that because she was told a number of years ago, you cannot transform this world unless you bring the animals along.
What?
Right? Yeah. Isn't that
I'm
interesting?
putting in my notes right now. I just put that in there. Animal energy.
Yeah. You cannot transform this world unless you bring the animals along. Because see, this world belongs to them too. And so what we found is that animals also have emotional baggage. And so when people go through our certification program for the emotion code, they have to work on 5 animals, because we know that if you work on 5 animals, probably a couple of them, or maybe 3, will have some kind of issue. And chances are you clear that emotional baggage, that issue is going to go away. And it's the most amazing thing. And another amazing thing is that it works at a distance. It doesn't have to be done live and in person. In fact, most of our practitioners around the world are now earning money working on other people in other countries, most of whom they'll never actually meet, but many of whose lives will be changed. So yeah, it's welcome to the 21st century. It's wild.
And Doc, when we're talking about when you're learning that the patients and the individual is learning that they could actually find out which emotions they have and they can swipe them off, and they're working with other individuals. It's to the concept of healing the animals. I can totally see that, because we meet patients and we see patients that have actually, they'll bring their animals in. They'll just bring them into the office. You've seen it before, and they're like, hey, there's something going on. And they're really sad. Something's going on. And I had to think all day that pet is probably absorbing the energy, or vice versa with the owner. And now when you created the emotion code, you made the body code, and you've done belief code. Are you seeing that more individuals now are giving you these testimonials saying, Doc, I had this issue and I had this emotion and I just started working on it, and now my physical ailments are starting to go away? You're starting to get these testimonies and seeing people literally trying to take their own healing in their own hands?
Yeah, we've got 10,000 of those, I think, somewhere.
I love it, Doc.
Yeah. It's just been happening over years, and People send in these stories from all over the world. I mean, behind me on the wall are, some of the languages that the books have been published in, and it just keeps going. I mean, and it's not about me. I tell people all the time, look, I'm just here to teach this, but it's not about me. If my ego were involved in this, it wouldn't be so easy. It would be way more complicated because, the ego wants to make things complicated, but my ego is not in this. I know that this is not me. This is really from the higher power. And it's just really cool. It's come into the world at a time when we really, really need it. And it's simple enough that, kids can use it, and kids all over the world are using it and having really good results.
Doc, I mean, the effects that I've seen, I've had some patients and individuals in this area around Franklin, and patients have told me that they found one of your certified practitioners in the area, and they were getting their emotions handled. And that's what like a little girl with anemia, and was kept having sleep issues. And they said, it was something that happened to her when she was 5 years old. And it's like, really, where did you go? And they told me about this practitioner. I was like, well, keep going because it's working. I mean, and to me, like going back and finding that the body would have like a subconscious, like a program, like when you say it's binary, like the brain is actually, showing you the physical pain to show that there's something going on. One thing that was really interesting too, when I read your work, is you talk about like how the heart and the brain are really connected. You talk about how the heart gets in the wall. I know time's precious. I want to make sure there's so many questions I have, but I want to ask, like, what's the heart wall? Like they were talking about the heart wall. I'm really interested in that.
Sure. Well, back in the 1960s, when they started doing heart transplants, it didn't take too long before they started noticing a weird phenomenon where sometimes some patients would come back and after their transplant, and they would report that suddenly their taste in music or food or sports would have totally changed. Sometimes they'd have memories of being in places that they never in their life had ever visited. And in every case that I've ever seen, when they would connect these people with the donor's family, they would find out, well, yes, our son was a baseball player, and now you love baseball, but you didn't like it before. Gee, that's weird. Or, our daughter visited Rome every year, and now you have memories of being in Rome, but you say you've never ever been there. So those must be her memories. How weird is that? Well, this is called cellular memory, and there are whole books written about it. Ancient peoples believed the heart was the seat of the soul and the source of love and creativity and romance and the core of our being. And in the West, we've never really paid any attention to those ideas because they were from ancient societies. And we just thought, those people, they didn't have the technology that we have. We know the heart is just a muscle. That's all it is. It wasn't even until the 1970s that they discovered that the heart has all this gray matter and white matter. And it's got 40,000 dendrites in there, just like the brain. And they call it the little brain in the heart. And so we store our memories of the things we really love and the things we really enjoy. Those memories aren't stored here. They're stored in the heart. And so what happens is when a heart is transplanted, those memories and affinities go with the heart in many, many cases. Well, what we have found is that when you feel like your heart is going to break, and most of us at one point or another have had that feeling, right? Someone close to us has died, or we're being abused or hurt in some way, and it's like we just can't handle anymore. You can feel like your heart's going to break, like there's an elephant sitting on your chest, or like you can't breathe. The heart is under assault in those moments. And so the subconscious mind will throw up a wall around the heart to protect the heart from being totally broken. What is the wall made out of? Well, trapped emotions. It's made of emotional energies that form this wall. To the subconscious mind, it's just as real as any wall in our own physical reality, but it's on kind of a different dimension than what we're used to. But it's a very, very common phenomenon. In fact, 93% of people have put up what we call a heart wall. And so it makes it much more difficult for you to fall in love, stay in love. It makes it much more difficult for you to really manifest the perfect blueprint for your life that lies within your heart, because every single person has a blueprint in their heart of what their life can really be at its best. When you've got a wall around that heart and people tell you you should follow your heart, wow, that's so much more difficult, right? Because your heart is encased in layers of grief and sadness and, depression and anxiety and sorrow and, all those layers of things. In the Emotion Code book, we teach people how to take down this wall. And if it's the only thing you do for yourself, it can have a bigger effect on your health and on your success and your love relationships and your ability to feel the love of the Creator for you than anything else you could ever do. And sorry, sometimes I get emotional.
That's great.
But it's absolutely true. It's an amazing thing. And it's, it isn't something that I figured out. It actually was shown. It was shown to me. I actually had I was trying to help my wife decipher this dream that she had had. And as I'm trying to help her, all of a sudden, I have what I can only describe as a waking vision where suddenly the room that I'm in is no longer there. And I'm seeing this unbelievably beautiful hardwood floor. And I tell the whole story in the Emotion Code book. And I have this understanding that my wife's heart is underneath this floor. And it turned out that she had put a wall around her heart starting when she was 2 years old. She was born into a family that was really volatile. And her dad was kind of a rageaholic, a good man in every other way, but difficult. So she put up a wall because otherwise her little 2-year-old heart was going to break, right? And so she battled with depression and anxiety and never really felt like she belonged anywhere, even with people that she'd known forever, until that wall was removed. And then all of a sudden, all of that shifted and transformed for her. And she suddenly felt like she belonged where she never did before. I think it was the next case that I saw was a woman that came in to see me that she had really severe neck pain, and she'd seen a couple of other doctors for this, but she comes in to see me. And as I'm talking with her, she tells me that she's single. She's 38 years old. She's a nurse. She hasn't dated in 8 years. She's never going to date again. She's going to die single. She was very serious about it. And I said, well, why do you feel that way? And she said 8 years before, she was really in love with this guy that dumped her, broke her heart. And so I tested her and found she had put up a wall. There were 3 emotions, 3 layers, 3 different trapped emotions making up that wall around her heart that had all happened during the breakup 8 years before. And so I cleared those one at a time. Probably took maybe 4 or 5 minutes. And all of a sudden, when we cleared the last one, the neck pain, which she'd had for weeks, was instantly gone. It went from a 9 to a 0 instantaneously. And she was so excited and, so grateful. And I was grateful. And so she leaves the office. 3 months later, she comes back in. And I immediately remembered, and I said, hey, how are you? What's going on? She said, my neck has been fine since I was here. But she said, you cleared that heart wall for me. And that really works because 2 weeks after I was here, I found out my childhood sweetheart has been living right around the corner from me for almost 8 years. And we're dating and we're in love. And I think he's going to ask me to marry him, Now,
wow.
Think about that. He'd been living right around the corner for 8 years.
Wow.
8 years ago, 8 years before she had the breakup, why did she never run into him before? Well, she had this wall, right? And when the wall was taken down, all of a sudden, boom, things started happening. And I'm telling you, this can happen to you too, because you probably have the same kind of thing going on, right? You probably got a wall from bad things that happened, and that wall can get taken down, and then, wow, things can shift. We have had many people tell us that for the first time in their life, they know what it means to feel love or to feel joy or to feel the love of the Creator. For them, think about how profound that is. It's unbelievable, but it's true. And, I don't think it's too surprising that, that God would have a better way, to fix things that we've never thought of, never even considered.
That's right, Doc. I mean, that's why I was looking at these questions I have, and I was like, I love them because that was one of my next ones. Like when you find somebody open themselves up and a relationship or something came in, you just answered it. That was good. I was checking right here on my notes. This is good. I mean, Doc,
Cool.
these are so profound, and I could talk to you even more and more about it because I need to probably have to have you on another podcast because it'd be so great. Because I really would like to get into later more into like the body code, but to me, I just love information that people are getting validity, that they know that these blocks, like the heart blocks, these blocks can create problems. And I'm totally researching more now, like you were talking about, like the emotions that get trapped into an acupuncture meridian. And
Yeah.
now
You'll have to play
I'm
with
going to play
that.
with
It's
that,
kind of
and
fun.
I really am thankful because at times you're right. We have times when people come in and you put your hand on an area that has a physical pain, or you do something and then they just start breaking down, and then they'll tell you they have an
Right.
emotion of something that came up to their mind. They go, I just remember this time when I was such and such, and I was like, after I fixed, I worked
Yeah.
on that, and they're like, yes, and I'm like, that explains though that trapped emotion. And I just want to hope everybody here that is listening knows that they should pay attention, right, Doc? They should take into account like their emotions and not discount it, correct?
Well, absolutely. I mean, we just tend to kind of ignore our emotions and or think that we're totally a victim of our emotions. But our emotions are such a huge part of our lives. I mean, imagine trying to live in a world where no emotions were possible. I mean, life wouldn't even be worth living without the highs and the
Yeah,
lows, right? It's what makes life interesting. Um,
that's
so
it. That's right.
but yeah, sometimes we end up with baggage that we don't want. But we're now beginning to realize what a huge effect it's having on us, our emotional baggage, in every
Yeah.
area. And and 300 emotions might sound like a lot, but most people, once they start doing this process, can get rid of all of those, in a year or so. And it's kind of like brushing your teeth. You brush your teeth a couple times a day, and you release an emotion once or twice a day, and
Clear up.
doesn't take long. You're
Yeah,
doing a lot
that's
better.
exactly right. And Doc, I mean, I want to do. You have the videos, like for example videos online where people can watch you do like a session on somebody, or watch you do some kind of
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff online on YouTube. Our main website is at
discovery healing.
discoverhealing.com.
Okay.
And then my personal site is at Dr. Bradley Nelson, DrBradleynelson.com. And so for more information about certification or to find a practitioner that can work with you, we've got a map of people all over the world. You don't have to work with somebody in your hometown or even in your same hemisphere. You might find somebody that you really like. Maybe they're on the other side of the world. That's okay. It still works.
Man, I love this, Doc. And we're going to put it in our show notes. We'll put it in our captions. And we'd love to have you come back on. I really would. I know that you have I love the information, and hopefully we can become friends about that. I do.
Yeah.
I really am intrigued by this, and I want everybody out there to buy your books. I have them. They are amazing, and I look at them for insight, especially. I will say this, everyone, at times when I first started out, I never thought in my practice that I would ever work with people that had severe emotional fatigue and traumas. You just think that you're going to go in and just treat physical and structural, and then all of a sudden God puts people in your life and he's like, no, you're going to help them in a different way. And you're like, oh man. And so, but thankfully there's people
Yeah,
like you that give us the info, Doc. And I'm so thankful. Can you tell, we got your website, Dr. Bradley Nelson. Okay. So what's up next for you? I'd like to ask a couple quick questions. Okay. So are you doing any traveling soon?
sure.
Anything coming up soon?
Yeah, we're leaving. We have a seminar in Tokyo on the, let's see, I think on the, it's in May.
Okay.
Middle of May.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
We're leaving in a couple weeks to do that. We've got some other seminars coming on in the U.S. later this year. Big seminar in Poland. We normally do more events in a year. This year we're kind of taking a step back and doing some regrouping. But yeah, we also have another book coming out that we just turned in the manuscript a few days ago. That's called The Heart Code. It's all about the heart. And
Wow.
the hardest thing about writing that book was choosing from the thousands of testimonials and stories from people about all the different things that have happened when you take down the heart wall. And by the way, animals get this too. Just people falling in love and just physical things getting better, all kinds of crazy things happening. So it's a really fun book, and it'll teach you how to use the emotion code, and also specifically it's geared towards the heart, because the heart wall is so important. It's part of the emotion code book, and we also cover it in the body code book. But we really wanted to write another book just about the heart wall because it's so important. If that's the only thing you do, like I said before, it's the most important thing I think you can possibly do for yourself.
So we have the heart code book. I'm putting it right here. So you just turned in the manuscript, Doc. When's it going to be released?
Yeah. It comes out the 2nd of December, and it's available on Amazon right now.
Okay, got it right here. I'll get it, Doc. This is it. Okay. This is amazing, Doc. I mean, truly, thank you. I mean, I gotta exchange contact info with you. I won't bug you too much, but I just think you're a great guy, and you're really cool. And I won't bug you, I promise. But I will say thank you again for joining us today. Now, one last thing. What's your favorite type of music?
Yeah. Oh, my favorite type of music. I really love classical music. I listen to everything. I'm kind of an older guy. I love Linda Ronstadt. I love Handel.
Yeah.
I still I love the Eagles. My wife won't let me play it very much anymore because I get a little tired of it.
No, hey, I always like to ask that because people, when they about their music, I just love it. Like individuals like you have smart individuals, bright individuals, cool individuals, and they all like you. They'll have like different music, and you just never knew that about the person. I think people out there are just like, wow, like I listen to some Eagles, and I've had some patients come in. Like I had one lady, she was a psychologist, and I mean, the way she presented herself, I thought, Doc, she'd be like, straight classical or Baroque period class. And she's like, no, I just jam out to hip hop like all day. And I was just like, okay, like this is great. So, oh man. Oh, Doc. Well, okay. So stick around right after we get done with this. Stop hitting the recording. But everybody out there, please get the heart code, and please get all of his books. I truly mean it. It's really been a game changer for me. We really appreciate it. It is an honor, Doc, and we'll have you on again. For everybody here at the Ancient Health Podcast, thank you so much. Learn to address your emotions. It's the biggest key in your healing. Thank you so much, Doc. See you, everybody.